Hello, in this lecture we will take a look at the hosted Blazor type, which is basically a client Blazor type project joined with an API project, which is .NET Core API. Okay, so it is a bit complex, it is a bit complicated, but first of all, what you have to understand is how it runs, okay? How these several projects may interact. So if we look in this project I have created, I wrote a bit of code in it. You can see that we have in our File Explorer, Solution Explorer, we have Blazor App 1 it's called. And we have this little dot and client, okay? So this is the first project. This is the client project. And then we have another one. We have another one, which is Blazor App 1 server. And then finally, we get another one. This one is called shared, okay? So the server part is the API part, okay? This is the API part. Now the client part is the client-side Blazor. And then finally, this shared one is simply a class library which is shared between server and client projects. So basically the idea is that you would only have to create one model class for both projects. Okay, so you send a response, and you use the same model to retrieve the response as you would to send it. Not just the same model type, the same way you describe the model, but also the same file, so you don't have to rewrite the file several times. Okay, now the important thing to note here, this is very, very important. The server is the main project. Okay, it's gonna be the main project. So whatever local host it's running on, or whatever name it has, whatever friendly name it has, whatever binding it has on the IIS, that is how you will access your whole thing, okay? You have only one entry point, so you don't have two different URLs for API and the client part for the pages, okay? You don't have that. There's only one. So the way that works is quite interesting. If I go to program.cs, this is where it all starts. Program.cs in the server. If I go here, I can find this little thing, okay? And it's quite simple. Just a normal, basically a normal API startup project. Okay, so you have this little builder, and then you go to the startup. You go to the startup.cs in the server part. We are still in the server part. So if I go to the startup.cs in the server part, you see I have, again, just the general stuff that would go into any API project. A way to retrieve the data, a way to take in the data, a way to read it, okay? And then we go down, and we start seeing something more Blazor-like. So we have this use Blazor debugging, okay? We won't get into that. And as with the other types of projects, I urge you not to change anything. Do not change anything in this arrangement. These startup files, program.cs files, and also the app.razor files, these should remain as they are in the template, because Blazor, once again, it's a new technology, it's a young technology. Things may change, these default things may change in the future, and it will be a lot easier for you to adjust the versions if you have those basic default things as they are. You will be able to just copy, paste it, and replace it. You won't need to work too much on that. So where it all starts with the client side, you see we have this app use client side Blazor files. And then you see there's a reference to client.startup. So this is now client.startup, that is client startup.cs. Okay, this is in the client part. We won't get into that yet. You can also see we have use endpoints. So we have, first of all, map default controller route, which is for controllers, okay, in the API. And then you have this map fallback to client-side Blazor. So this part is basically for navigating between pages, okay. We have one for API and one for pages. This is very important. And again, I would urge you not to touch it. It would be best that way. And right here we have the type, that is the startup.cs, again in the client now. And then we have this index.html. So this is the same HTML, the same kind of an HTML which we looked at in the client side Blazor lecture. Okay, this is the starting point of your application, the default document. This is very important. Okay, so now if we go to that client side, we can see that we have program.cs again, startup.cs. Okay, and the startup.cs is the same exact one as you would find in your client-side Blazor, standalone client-side Blazor application, the same with the program.cs. It goes to the startup.cs in the client side. So as you can see, it runs quite simply. There's really not too much excitement in this. But the more exciting part is actually how these API interactions work. Okay, this is very important. This makes your life a lot easier, but it is still a very young option, so I wouldn't always recommend to choose this, but it's something to consider. So I wrote a bit of code here, What I've done is I've created a test page. Okay, I've created a test page, and everything else I left as it was by default. I created test page, and then in the server, I created a test controller, and finally in the shed I created a test model. So we have a very basic application. If I go to the test controller, you can see I have this tiny little controller with two action methods. The first one is with a route, test route get, because we have a get, HTTP method get. And this one will simply return our shared model, okay? Test model is called, and it will simply establish a new one, a new value, and it will return it. Now the test route post rather, will have a post method. Okay, so it will require some kind of a body. As you can see, it's going to be JSON body. Okay, and we are using the same test model. You will see soon why. And from that test model, it will simply replace the values, and it will return the replaced values. Okay, so the model is quite simple. As you can see, we only have test model, value 1 string, and value 2 an integer. Now, we need to go to the page to explore the whole fun of it. We go to the page, test page. And what we have here is quite simple. Once again, we have the page route, test page. Now, I added the navigation in the nav. Okay, so it's in the component and the default one. Nothing fancy about it. And then afterwards we have the injection HTTP client, HTTP. Okay, we have the name of the test page. Again, mostly the stuff is default, but what's not default is these API calls. Okay, so we have retrieve data and send data, and I have two methods. And then in the code section I have test model. Okay, and I call it test output. Now you have to notice I have in this case Blazor app1.shed.test model. Okay, now in the test controller, I only have shed.test model. So what happens in the test page in the client side all has that shared folder. You see, it has a shared folder, so we can't really do anything about it but to declare the full namespace. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do a little using statement if you don't like seeing too much code, too many words. Okay, so we have that, and we display it. If it's not null, we display it in these two paragraphs, value 1 and then value 2. Very simple. So in the get test, this is the exciting part. We have an assignment. Okay, we set that result of this API call, and as you can see, we do it through HTTP, and then we use this method called getJSONAsync. Now, this is a beautiful method, okay? And the reason is that you don't really need to do any work. You don't need to do any work. You just have your model. It has to have the names of your values according to what you receive in terms of that JSON string. Okay, so just like any normal serialization, deserialization of a JSON string. Okay, so we declare that model and we declare the route and the parameters, and that's it. We are good to go. We will retrieve that, we will assign that, and it will display. You see how easy is that? Now, there is a downside to this method. You don't really get too many ways to check for your response, let's say, properties, right? So you can't really check for headers. You can't send headers as well. You can't do any of that stuff. Now, in terms of headers, what you could do, I could do a little space, for example, like that, and then I can do HTTP default request headers. You see, like that. And then I could add them. Need be, I can do that, and then they would be sent. Now, I will not do that in this case, there's no point. So you can do that. Obviously, that would go alongside every request, but if you have some authorization token, for example, this would work perfectly. You could actually do this HTTP client thing as a global thing. Okay, so as a global thing, you wouldn't have to inject it every time on every page. Now, we covered the getJSON. We only have left the postJSON. PostJSON is pretty much the same thing. As you can see, we can declare the return type, in this case our test model. What you shouldn't do is do string. String will not work. Integer, Boolean, whatever other type you have, it will work. If you need a string, you should use getString. Okay, so that's what we have. Test model, just like that. And what happens here, we declare a route in the parameters, and the second parameter is test output. The test output is our object of test model. You see, I just pass it through and it will take care of everything else for me. I don't need to serialize, deserialize, none of that. It's as easy as that. Okay, so the second downside of this is that you don't also get any kind of real error. You get an exception thrown. You see, you get an exception thrown and you get a bit of text. So from the text, you can figure out what went wrong, if it wasn't authorized, if the route wasn't fine and all that. But you don't get to see the status or anything like that. So it is a bit troublesome in that way, but still you can save a lot of time with this method. Okay, so this would post JSON, it would send that, and then it will return our modified value. So it's quite simple. And in case you need more control, in case you need more access to these responses and requests, you can simply use any other normal method from HTTP client. Okay, so whether it's send async, get async, all these things will work perfectly as long as you use HTTP client method of calling and accessing those APIs. Okay, so that's it. We can do a quick launch, take a look at how it would work, how it works. And again, you can save a lot of time with these, but do be careful. There is that lack of control, so it might it might ruin your efforts in some ways, in some API design. So I just go to test page and I can click retrieve data. I get test value, I get 100, all works perfectly, right? And then I can send data, and as you can see, it was changed. I get test response, and then I get 50. So it works perfectly. Now, whether I recommend this option or not, I really can't say for sure. Okay, normally I would recommend people to separate all the things. So you have a separate kind of running API, you have perhaps even separate servers for databases, or even separate servers for clients and APIs, maybe even different placements for different parts of your applications in different API projects. I really do recommend separating projects. Having said that, there are cases when you have a very small project, you don't really care about the security of a project. So in those cases, this would truly save a whole lot of time. And with that, we will conclude this lecture.